Hi.
Hello, welcome back to Tea in a Chat
With Harry and Zara. Harry and Zara.
No, okay, Harry, Zara, and today...
Yeah, we got a guest today, which is exciting.
Hannah! Woo!
Who is actually my sister.
Yeah, Hannah McBride. Hello, Hannah McBride. Say hello to everyone.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's exciting to have a guest.
It is. It really is. I think we've got a few guests on this season, which will be exciting.
Yes.
With lots of different sort of things to chat about, maybe unexpected. I feel like this episode might be a bit different to what people are expecting us to record, if that makes any sense. It may make sense as we chat about it.
An important one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially within the industry.
Yes.
But yeah. So, hi. Welcome, Hannah. Welcome to Tea in a Chat.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about some nutrition today.
Yes.
Yes, so as Hannah just said there, today we're going to be having a little chat about nutrition and sort of fueling your body as a performer, as a human as well, but more so as a performer who's exerting so much energy. And again, maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but this will probably be more correlated to dancers, because I just think that mindset is a bit more prominent in that world rather than MT. But tell me if I'm wrong.
It's like a Mythbusters episode, I feel.
Yeah, this is my favourite episode. I'm so excited to have Hannah on.
Yeah, but first things first, let's not scoot around the fact that we need to discuss what drinks we've got.
I forgot. Okay, well, let's start with Hannah because she doesn't have one.
I completely forgot to get a drink, but if I was going to have a drink, I would have a cup of tea.
Quite right. I have a cup of tea too, because it is Tea in a Chat with Harry and...
It's not a custom that you have to have a drink, to be fair. And to be fair, I don't always have a tea. I've got a peppermint tea, so, I've also got lemon water.
He's got his lemon water.
I want to cleanse...
Anyway.
No, but that I'm feeling like we should talk about something totally unrelated, because normally we go off on something before we actually start.
But we don't need to. The last podcast we filmed, Hannah, which
every podcast we've done,
the first 10 minutes of the podcast is nothing to do with anything that we wanted to talk about. It's just us rambling. But not today. We're moving on.
Okay, let's do this professionally.
So let's just start with, Hannah, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us who you are, what you do, your background, anything you want the listeners to know.
Yeah, so my name is Hannah and I am a dietitian. So I've got a degree in exercise health and nutrition, and then I did a master's in dietetics. And then I worked as a dietetic assistant for a little bit before I qualified, and now I work as a community dietitian in the NHS. So I see a lot of different people, a lot of different conditions. But today I think we'll just be doing sort of generalised advice, really. So I would say if you have any sort of specific medical conditions or dietary requirements or anything, then just maybe look for some more support, like personalised nutrition from like a dietitian or your doctor or something like that.
Definitely.
That's important, I think, because I suppose everyone's very specific, aren't they? Each individual. So you can't really have sort of a blanket. Yeah.
For me, this episode is more about, like, I'm going to say to you, I was told this while we were training, and you're going to go, oh my God, that's so dumb. And then it's going to be, we're going to break the nonsense, like the myths within performing arts training.
It's a Mythbusters episode,
exactly.
Like I said.
I feel like before we move on to anything else, it would be beneficial at this point, because I know you said to reach out to people and whatever. Can you explain a little bit the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist, and like when would you need one and the other, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so with dietitians, we are the only people who can diagnose and treat nutritional conditions, and we're governed by the HCPC standards. And with nutritionists, you can have lots of different qualifications, and not to say that nutritionists are any less professional than a dietitian. But because we're governed by professional standards, it's a protected term, a dietitian. So we are the only people who can use that term, and we have to have the regulated qualifications to be able to do that. Whereas a nutritionist, anyone can really call themselves a nutritionist, and you're not really sure exactly what qualifications they might have.
Right.
There is a associate nutrition board, I think, but yeah.
Yeah. I just think that's interesting.
This is interesting as well. I feel like I should know this because we're related, and I'm like, this is really quite new to me. I'm like, yeah.
Well, it's funny. The reason I say that is because I know in my past and how I've trained and whatever, that there's people who have classed themselves as nutritionists or given nutritionist advice who definitely weren't qualified to do such a thing. Definitely weren't, like... They probably just watched a YouTube video, and in their head that gave them the right to give us some pretty bad advice, you know.
So just could it just tell me if this is wrong, but could anyone sort of say I'm a nutritionist even if they haven't necessarily done any sort of work towards it? I mean, that might be a bit of a blanket statement, but is that could I go out and say, I'm going to give you some nutritional advice as a nutritionist, even if I wasn't
trained? Yeah,
I'd just, like Zara said, I watched a YouTube video. Could I do that? And that would be, you know, acceptable in some regard.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be acceptable, but it is, because it's not a protected term. And, you know, anyone can say, oh, I've, you know, done this course and this course, even if they haven't. And not to say that you know, nutritionists are bad, but I know a lot of nutritionists who are really insightful and have a lot of knowledge, and I would just check that they're on the associate register for nutritionists.
So do your research.
I think you have to, again, have a certain amount of qualifications to be able to register for that.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think that's important to know, because obviously if you feel like a nutritionist would be beneficial, definitely, you know, go forward with that. But by the sounds of it, definitely make sure you know who you're going forward with.
And I also think that's good to
check the credentials, definitely.
Yeah. It's good to think about in the past as well, like who has been, I'm thinking in a dancer's perspective, because I don't believe there's anyone who's got to a professional level of dancing and hasn't been given some sort of nutritional advice by someone. I think it's interesting to think back and think, who gave me that advice? Should I take that on? Are they qualified to tell me to eat this, not eat this, do this, you know? There's
so much out there. I think with social media and things like TikTok and Instagram, you get any old person putting something online, and I think, I mean, I know I'm guilty of looking at something online and thinking, that looks great, yeah. I mean, one of the things I think is, I'm quite a fan of a back stretch or cracking my back. And I'll see something and I'll be like, that looks amazing, let's try it. Come on, Zara, let's try it. And then we do it, and I'm like, well, that was really underwhelming and just a waste of time. And I feel like there must be a lot of stuff out there that is like that, because, I mean, I'm a victim. I've consumed that stuff.
It's so easy to see it. Like, I believe everything I see on TikTok's true. TikTok's my, like...
TikTok's, it's got to be the worst form
I know, it's so
getting
bad.
Your information, but it's also so accessible, I guess.
Funny.
Are you on TikTok, Hannah? Maybe we should get Hannah on TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok, but maybe I could start an account.
Everyone spam Hannah's Instagram right now and say, started TikTok.
That could be really cool, actually.
Yeah. I'd watch it.
You should look at videos. Take videos of people giving nutritional advice or whatever that isn't right, and be like, I feel like people would watch that though as well, you know.
Hannah's too sweet for that. She wouldn't do that.
No, she would.
I'd be scared I'd get all these hate comments.
No. You're the one that's doing your job right.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's true.
So I think let's chat a little bit about, I feel like I'm going to give you some pointers, but I knew nothing about it, and you just, you know, say what you want to say and whatever.
Respond organically to
Yes.
Zara's anecdotes and information that she's about to give you.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess, again, from my perspective and a dancer perspective, well, from an acting perspective, how much of a thing was this, or not really? Like,
we never had anyone talk to us about what we were eating or anything. The closest thing that we came to with that is probably being told to decide how/who we want to be, in the way of, do you want to be like a leading man, or the girl next door, whatever that may be, and try and fit that mould as part of your brand, so that we weren't sort of told to, I want to be the fat best friend, okay, eat loads of cake, none of that, if that makes sense. But it was kind of, there was no necessary like guidance, but it was just like, decide on what your
I guess that's the thing
brand wants to be.
With acting, is that it's a lot more inclusive in that way. Like,
There's a
doesn't
bit
matter.
more variation.
Yeah,
isn't there?
there's like well, don't get me wrong, it's harder to get jobs in certain aspects of it, but if you are a certain way, you look a certain way, there's still a job out there for you somewhere, which I think the dance world is slightly becoming more like that, but it's still very much do you fit the costume? Like, how slim you are is definitely still a factor of that, I think.
Can I ask a quick question to Hannah? Did you watch that? What was it?
Oh.
It was on recently, not too long ago.
On
about
BBC.
No, it's not paranormal, because that's the wrong word. It was on BBC about
the dark side of ballet schools, I think it was called.
About Elmhurst and what was the other one?
Royal Ballet.
Royal Ballet. It was in the news a bit as well. It's got to be about a month ago now.
Yeah, you should watch it if you haven't. It's very insightful.
I'm not sure when this episode's coming out, but we're recording it in sort of beginning to mid-October.
Yeah.
FYI, so it was about a month ago. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think you'd find it interesting. It's only about half an hour long.
I've not seen it, but I'll check it out, and sounds interesting.
I think you'd have a lot of opinions on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as I was saying, gearing it slightly more towards dancers, because I think this is kind of the world we're coming from. So imagine if I explained to you, for example, my sort of training college day, right? We would start with ballet class a dance class at around 8 in the morning, and then we'd have classes throughout the day, most of which were physical. Like, I would say 85% were dance classes, and then we had some written work as well. But we were there. Our shortest day, we finished at, I think, 7:20 or 7 o'clock, and then our longest day, we finished at 8:30. So 12 and a half hours worth of a lot of physical.
Yeah.
Is that Monday to Friday?
Monday to Friday. Actually, Friday was a little bit shorter, but I still think we finished at like 6.
So roughly a 12-hour day, Monday to Friday. Just so we can sort of clarify, these classes, how were you pretty much going near enough full out, or could you give us like a percentage of where you would be going to in your energy exertion?
Oh, every physical dance as much as you could go. Like, you're training professionally. There's no, unless you want to be shouted abuse at, you're not going to go in and give 20%, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, every class has its own, like, a different exertion level to a certain extent. Like, don't get me wrong, you're still going to sweat at a ballet bar, but it doesn't feel the same as bodycon. Like, you still have... Because, on top of our dance classes, we had body conditioning classes, like boys' strength, like so much stuff.
Very physical.
Very physical. And
roughly
how our days would pan out, I mean, every day was different, but we would have 2 classes in the morning, sort of a little break, another 2 classes, a little break, and so on and so forth. We got a longer lunch break. And all the classes were an hour and a half, at least. So just with that in mind, just painted that little picture. As a dietitian, what would your advice be for sort of fueling your body through that, so that you get the best out of your body and you can apply your brain and everything in class as well? Like, what sort of foods would you eat? What sort of, like, would you eat before you go into your first class? Would you wait until whenever, you know?
Oh, it's an interesting question, to be fair. There's a lot that comes into sort of fueling your body, but one of the main things I would say is probably carbohydrates. they're a main source of energy for our body, and they help us, to keep fuller for longer. So especially because you've got a really long day ahead of you, I think carbohydrates would especially be really important for fueling that amount of dancing. And there's different kinds of carbohydrates. Usually the easiest way to explain it is to kind of break it down into, you've got like your simple carbohydrates, which are, your simple sugars and things like honey or table sugar or soft drinks, that kind of thing. And then you've got some more complex carbohydrates, which are more sort of whole grains, things like your breads, your pastas, your rice, and they've usually got a bit more fibre in. So I would say before you're going into any of the dance classes, or like before your first one, it's probably easier to get some of those simple sugars in, just because they're easily digested. They get into your system really quickly, and it gives you that boost of energy. So that could be things like, I don't know, a bagel with peanut butter and jam. It could be maybe some porridge with a few berries and things on top. But you're sort of looking to have a bit less fibre, because that takes a bit longer to digest. And sort of going for those simple carbohydrates first. And then I would say after a class, so after you've worked really hard, you've probably burnt a lot of calories, you've probably used a lot of energy, you're now probably looking to refuel. So again, getting those complex carbs back in. So these are your pastas and your whole grains and things. You would also look to get a bit more protein in, which helps with muscle repairing. And then I would also rehydrate as well. That's quite an important thing sort of before and after any kind of exercise. So more of a well-rounded meal, I would say, after your dancing. So maybe something like a burrito bowl, or maybe some spaghetti.
It's going to make me hungry, this podcast.
Like a spaghetti bolognese or something like that. And then with your hydration, it's usually recommended sort of 6 to 8 glasses per day. But it is quite individual hydration based on, your weight and how much exercise you're doing, that kind of thing. But that's a general overview, of course, I would say. I don't know if that's helpful at all.
It's so interesting to me.
I find it interesting.
That's so fascinating to me. And don't get me wrong, when I was training, and before I was training and after my training, like throughout my dance life, there's been so many people that have like been advocates for make sure you're fueling your body, make sure you're blah blah blah. Like they especially, I'm going to say this is like a general statement, but especially like my female teachers were very much like, look after yourself, make sure you're eating well. Like I remember one of our teachers, we would come in and she would ask us what we had for breakfast, and if we hadn't had a good breakfast, she was like, go eat something. Like so it's not all bad. I feel like as this podcast goes on, it might sound like I'm speaking really negatively about it, but I also feel like, coming from the world I came in, that the people that have said negative things stick with you more because of the competitive aspect of it all. And they're like,
I feel like that's a life thing. I think we'll often pick up and receive and take in negative stuff more than we do positive. And because I'm just about to say some things I've been told, which I just want to clear that it's not been everyone, but there's definitely been things. So like right here, I've got written down from before, no bread and carbs are Satan. Which is like the absolute opposite to what you've just told us to do. But that is the kind of thing, like I remember being told to, we can have bread. I mean, it's stupid because sweet potato is a carb, is it not? But we were told to cut up sweet potato and put it in our toaster and have that as toast instead of bread. It's
that's quite extreme, isn't it?
It's like, and don't get me wrong, I understand where they come. No, I don't actually. That's me trying to be nice. I think that's just stupid,
I think that information is a bit weird.
But things like that, like literally you're taught that, like, you have to... Carbs are something to be afraid of, that they'll make you... Regardless of how much exercise you're doing in the day, like we were doing so much, and even before I started there, you know, like I was doing so much physical activity, and it's like, yeah, but no carbs, no, that'll make you fat, even though you're working out 10 hours a day. That couldn't possibly have pasta, you know. It's just so funny to me, and I think it's a very common thing among dancers, of like, quote unquote, bad nutritional advice from nutritionists that are maybe not, or
have no qualifications.
Yeah. Anyway, so if for, like I was saying, my schedule was quite busy, and we were at the building when I was training all day. Like we were there all day. We didn't have any forms of like cooking, any forms of heating food up or anything. Like we weren't allowed any of that.
You weren't allowed it?
No, we tried to get...
so you can like have a microwave?
No, we tried to get one, but...
Like a kettle?
No.
Really?
Sometimes we used to go to Sainsbury's Cafe to get some hot food, but other than that, we weren't allowed. Everything was sort of cold, pre-made before we came, or
I guess there's nothing,
shop-bought.
I guess, wrong with... I don't know. Is there anything wrong with the temperature of food? Does that make a difference?
What was that?
Does it make a difference, the temperature of your food or drink? Does that, like... I mean, obviously, I know in drinks it will affect, you know, you can't really have a cold cup of... I mean, I guess you can have a cold cup of tea, but...
I often do.
It's,
I don't drink it.
Would that affect... I don't know, in my mind I just find that really weird. Like, that's just basic things.
It doesn't affect the nutritional value, does it, or does it?
No, I wouldn't say it. It depends. Like different ways of cooking can affect sort of how many nutrients are in the food. But I would say, you know, from a temperature point of view, the only thing I'd be concerned about is probably like if you were having chicken or something, or from like a food safety point of view.
Yeah.
Obviously making sure it's the right temperature to eat,
but then
so
I
you
suppose
don't get a moldy stomach.
in turn with that, I guess not having access to things such as a microwave or whatever will then affect what you choose to bring.
Yeah, definitely.
Or buy, I guess, as well, because you need it to sort of be accessible in some regard. You know, you're not going to necessarily bring in a cold, what was it, something like, I don't know, some pasta dish that you might want to heat up. You're not going to necessarily... I mean, pasta's maybe a bad example, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That might affect your choices.
I've got a question. I was told that, which I don't know if this is part of the reason why we weren't allowed a microwave. I just remember being told that if you put your food in the microwave, it reduces its nutritional value by 50%.
I'm not 100% sure on the exact, details, but I think it can affect, you know, how many nutrients and things are in there.
That's interesting, isn't it?
That's interesting.
It's like ways of cooking as well. So I think it's something like steaming, I think, was one of the best ways to preserve all the nutritional content of the food. It's more sort of like vitamins and minerals and that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So what's the worst, generally
quote
speaking?
Unquote worst, because...
Yeah. What's like one of the worst, the not so good ways? I mean, it's not a fixed rule, but I'm just intrigued.
We did it a long time ago at uni, but I can't remember exactly what the worst one was.
Is there a couple that spring to mind?
Yeah, I think a few of them had sort of similar results,
Right.
but I think it was steaming that was the best one. I can't remember the worst one, sorry.
So just steamy food.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorted.
It's funny though, you saying that, and I just want to make a quick disclaimer, is I think when we were training as a collective group of dancers, I think when we heard things like this, it was like, okay, well, steaming your food's better, so you can't do nothing but steam your food. Anything that's not steamed you can't have, which is, it's not life. That's not how it works.
Not realistic, is
it? Like, imagine you, and especially, I'll get back into my question from before, but when you're there all day, like, it's not, I think dancers can have the tendency to take things as very black and white and very like, okay, well, I can't have carbs, I have to steam my food, and I think what I want to get across in this podcast is that it's very everything's very balanced, and you've just got to.
Well, that's important to have sort of holistic and a holistic experience. You want to be able to function to the best of your ability. Take in as much as you can, put out as much as you can.
Exactly.
And if you're not sort of in a mindset, or your body's not fueled correctly, then your potential is reduced, in my sort of view. You know, I mean,
I agree.
What do you think, Hannah? Does that sort of correlate?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all to do with, a balanced diet as well. Like you say, if you're not fueling well, then you aren't going to get the best results out of it. Especially, when we were talking about like carbohydrates and stuff, because it's like your main source of energy. If you don't get enough, then you can have side effects of that. So, for example, like your concentration, carbohydrates are really good for your brain. So in order to sort of think and learn and concentrate, you need carbohydrates in order to do that. And then, you might get low blood sugars as well. So you might be feeling quite weak and lightheaded. And obviously that's not great for when you're trying to dance and get the best out of it. So, yeah, I'd agree with that.
Is it possible that some of these, this is a question that's popped into my head, but is it possible that some of the things that if you don't sort of fuel or look after your body enough in a nutritional way, and you're exerting 12-ish hours a day, Monday to Friday, can there end up being obviously like side effects that might then lead to a bit more permanent stuff? Does that make sense? I'm trying to be
the thing
open.
is, we know nothing, so we'll ask you. But obviously, if you're like, no, Harry and Sarah, please tell us.
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? Is that, could you end up with some sort of any issues that whether they could be rectified or not? Does that make sense? Is that a thing that can happen?
Yeah, I think so. So, like, your body becomes kind of imbalanced in a way.
Yeah.
And what else can happen is, if you haven't got enough energy, your body can start to use energy from fats as well. So then you can lose weight, but then it can also start to use energy from protein, which is mainly stored in your muscles. So you might get muscle loss as well. So again, you're not like, if say you were the dancer, I know, Zara, you spoke before about having to do lifts and things. Like, if you've got poor muscle mass and that's decreasing, then you're not going to be able to perform to that standard.
Exactly. It's going to lead to things like injuries and your body's just like, stop, I need more to do what you're asking me to do.
It just feels really crazy to me, because it's like my point was, I think it reduces an already shorter career. So as a performing dancer, as you say, it's already quite a short career, generally speaking, anyway. I'm being very general
compared to most careers.
Well, when I think of training as an actor, I could continue to act until I die. Effectively, you're probably not going to dance into your 80s, generally speaking.
Not as a performer. A lot of people teach and whatever.
Yes, but my thinking is, so if all this stuff, I just feel like it condenses an even shorter career. Do you know what I mean? If you're not actually giving yourself a balanced, workable experience, it's surely just going to reduce. It's like burning the candle at both ends in my mind. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, back to my original question that we've kind of lost track of now. So we're talking about sort of being at college or training for a long time. You're out the house for that whole day. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think most places their day would finish at around dinner time, so they could go home and have dinner. But let's just say it was the same as my example. You're eating 3 meals a day pretty much out of the house, 2 to 3 meals a day out of the house. And you can't heat anything up, so you've got to meal prep. What would be like a good sort of meal prep sort of thing that you can take? You can eat cold, you're still getting your fueling. I should get my dad on this podcast as well, because hi Dad, another shout out for you. But he used to make all my lunches, bless him, and they were so good. So he should come on and give his advice too.
So I would say, like you say, meal prepping is probably the best way to go about it, and just being organised with it, so you know that you've got a nice kind of nutritious meal, or even snacks and things. Just getting a couple of snacks in that you can have, whether it's like a protein bar or like an oat bar, or maybe some nuts and dried fruit or something like that. Something that's like really easy to kind of store, and then also, you know, take along with you as you're training. It's really difficult meal-wise. It depends also on preference as well, doesn't it? So,
yeah, of course.
You know, I know for me that I can sometimes eat sort of cold meals from the night before. So I usually tend to make a big meal, and then I'll have the leftovers for lunch like the day after. But it can sometimes be sort of like chicken and rice and things. But I do eat that cold. I know some people like to have sort of more fresh things. So yeah, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of something that's really easy to sort of just pack and
I know I've kind of put you on this spot, sorry.
Yeah. Maybe even just like sandwiches and stuff, they usually stay quite fresh, don't they?
Yeah.
Sandwiches, or maybe
I guess my point in asking was that there's no sort of like do's and don'ts. Like, to me, a sandwich is something that would maybe be thought of as you wouldn't take that to lunch with you, aka carbs and whatever, or I don't know, like chicken and rice, but plain chicken and rice is obviously was considered better depending on how much of it you're eating. But like, I guess what I'm asking is, there's no right and wrongs, or is there right and wrongs? Is like, is there certain things where it's like, well, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think it's very like different for each person and their preferences probably. And like you say, there isn't a right or wrong answer. Some people might like to have the chicken and rice plain, whereas like some people that would just be so boring and not realistic and not able to have that every day. So maybe a few spices or additional things added to it to make it a bit more colourful or flavourful.
Do you know what?
Be a better option.
It's funny, and what I'm taking from this right now, which I'm sure so many other dancers or performers that are listening to this will take from it too, is that you're kind of been like, yeah, have what you want, but what you want on your food. If you want this, have this. Like, this will keep you fuller for longer. This will help you, but like, eat. If you've got leftovers, eat them. Like, whereas I think the reason I was asking you that is, I think in the past with quote unquote, I'm doing quotation marks, nutritionists that we spoke to before would be like, yeah, absolutely don't have a sandwich. Absolutely don't do this. Like, only this. You don't need any extra seasoning on your chicken, because that's just
empty calories.
Yeah, I hate that term, but yeah, you know, like, you know what I mean? And I think that's really, for me, you're like, yeah, have what you want. You're like, I don't know what to say to you, because whatever you like to eat, just have that, you know. And I think that's quite.
Well, it's almost like you've been conditioned, isn't it? So it's part of your training is also you're being conditioned to sort of think a certain way about certain things, which is detrimental in my opinion.
Definitely. I guess another sort of branch to that is, and I don't know from a nutritionist perspective, I guess if you're helping someone who is like a regular person, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, tell me if I'm saying anything wrong, but do you give them specific, like, you have to eat X amount of calories at this time, blah blah blah, like this is what you're aiming for the day, or is it just more generic, this is the food you're aiming for?
Yeah, it would depend on the patient and what sort of the reason for the referral was, but we usually tailor our plans to work for them specifically and work with their lifestyle and their food preferences. But I would sometimes work out, you know, how many calories that person needed just to function daily. and if they were looking to lose weight, then we could sort of go from there. But I wouldn't necessarily make like a meal plan for them, just because I feel like it doesn't sort of defeat the issue, which is usually to do with someone's behaviour around food and their relationship with food. So it might be that they're an emotional eater, so we sort of need to go into that first, rather than here's a meal plan, follow this. It doesn't change any habits that someone has, so we like to focus on, you know, what's the reason for you having that habit? What do you think you could do to, you know, stop that habit? Because you've already identified it's detrimental to your health. So we sort of go from there, and I like to involve people in their own plans as well, just because it helps with, you know, how much they're going to listen to you and how much they're going to take on that advice. If they can come up with a few ideas themselves, then they're more likely to stick to it then. So it is personalised, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, this is how many calories you need, this is exactly what you need to eat. I know people do it in different ways, but I've found that works best for people, just in my experience.
See, that's really interesting to me, because I feel like in the dance world, or training or wherever it is, if there is a sort of situation where someone feels like someone needs to lose some weight or whatever, it's, in my experience, it's been targeted with a meal plan, with a eat this amount of calories and not a tiny bit over, and you can't have like there's no such thing as cheat days and whatever, but we don't believe in that, but whatever, you know, it's like, it's very strict, it's very regimented, and if you do this you'll lose the weight and blah blah blah, where it's like, it's really not that simple. It's not, everyone's just so personal. Anyway, my reason for asking you that is, so is there, like, again, I know you'll say it's different for everyone, but let's say you're doing a big long day, like I said, at college, blah blah blah, and what sort of intervals would you eat throughout the day? So is it a case of you have your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, a snack, and that's it? Or do you not have snacks unless you're hungry? If you're not hungry, should you still eat snacks just to fuel your body, even if you don't feel like it? How do you stand on that?
Yeah, so I usually recommend at least 3 meals a day and up to sort of 3 snacks a day, because your body is constantly working, it's constantly burning calories, whether you're exercising or sleeping. It's always burning calories, so you need to replenish that in order to get the most out of whatever you're doing. So again, it depends on the person, and I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, you know, have a snack, like a couple of biscuits 3 times a day. It would really depend. You know, it should be balanced. But I would say sort of 3 meals, 3 snacks is usually the sort of standard. If someone was really struggling with like appetite or something, you might say every hour or so, every couple of hours, just even if it's a little bit of something. And again, like you say, you're quite busy with your schedule, so it might be that it depends when you can get in those snacks and those meals. But I would say, as an average, generally for most people, 3 meals, 3 snacks should be sufficient.
It's so funny to me, because I think there'll be so many dancers or like people in the arts world listening and going, "It's too many," you know, like their gut feeling will be like, "No." It's so funny,
this
but
is advice from someone who knows what they're talking about.
This is why it's so important to have you on, and to have you, because I feel like anyone listening to a dietitian be like, yeah, you can eat 3 meals and 3 snacks, and one of those snacks could be biscuits, and that's okay. You know, it's not, you're going to be okay.
Exactly, yeah. All about balance, isn't it? Like I don't say to people, oh, you can't have cake, you can't have biscuits, you know, because if you restrict that and you take that away from someone, it only makes them want it more.
Exactly, yeah.
And you're probably more likely to have it, you know, in secret, or, you know,
an excessive
on
amount
a weekend or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose that leads to further problems, doesn't it, as well? And people coming to see you down the line. I know, 'cause
Yeah.
they've been
True.
sort of conditioned to... It's very therapeutic, isn't it? Like, what you do, actually. So I've never... I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? But that's really... I just found that really interesting. There's a lot of psychological elements to... Which I guess, of course there is, you know, when you think about it.
Yeah.
I always say to you, like, not that, like, we were actively trying to lose weight, but if we were, it's like important in my soul that I have a sweet treat at the end of the day. Like, I just know for myself that is what I need. Like, I can, it doesn't have to be like a huge giant chocolate cake, but I just know that is like...
A couple of squares of dark chocolate.
Exactly. And I know that if I was to limit that and be like, no, I can't have that at all, that would really affect my mindset and, like, you know what I mean? And I think
It'd
that's...
affect your mindset, but also you'd be really, really, really cross.
I would be really, really, really gross. Hannah, this is funny, and I'll just tell the podcast as well. But last night, we were Harry was hungry, to be fair, right? And we were having cheese, we were having some camembert and some bread, and we had a little bit of pizza too, you know. Probably not the healthiest meal, but that's what we were
Saturday
having.
night, innit?
Saturday night, watching Strictly. And we were, like, sort of sharing everything as it was.
Yeah.
I had, like, my bread on the plate and my bits of pizza, and I was still eating, not finished, and Harry kept going, "You're gonna eat that one." I'm not rushing you, but like, are you gonna eat that? I know I've asked you, but, like, are you gonna eat that bit? I'm like, I don't know yet. You're so funny. It's not relevant, it just came up in my mind.
I was hungry, okay?
And then he stopped and turned round,
hungry.
to me, being like, "I'm sorry, I'm hungry," with cheese all over his face. It was funny.
It was a bit of an animalistic eating experience for me last night.
It was funny.
It was great, though. I did enjoy myself.
Food is fun. I really believe that. It's like,
Food
it's
is
such
fun.
a, like...
Cooking's fun.
It's so limiting to believe that you have to... You can only eat, quote-unquote, healthy food. You can only eat certain things. You can't eat carbs. You can't... Like, it limits you so much. It limits how much you can then socialise around food. And I mean that, like, if you go for dinner or whatever. Like, it's... I don't know. There's just so much...
I guess one of the points is that what is actually healthy is to eat in a balanced way.
Yeah. Well...
Inclusive of everything, generally.
Yeah.
You know, whether that be... you know, chicken and rice and a bit of cake and everything in between, that all of that's okay if it's a balanced way of doing it. And that's the healthy thing to do for your mind and for your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So one more thing I'll say before we wrap up, and if you've got anything else you want to say.
What's your favourite cake?
Oh, yeah, we've got to ask what your favourite cake is. What's your favourite cake?
Wasn't it the question that you were going to ask, was it? But...
It wasn't the question I was going to ask, but remember we did that on another podcast, so now we need to know what your favourite cake is.
My favourite cake is just any kind of chocolate cake. I love chocolate.
What was yours again?
I think it was red velvet, mine.
Oh, yeah, you like red velvet.
Which is a kind of chocolate cake, really, isn't it? So...
My favourite at this very second is the cinnamon one.
Oh, my word, yeah.
Hannah, I need to make you some cinnamon cake.
Sarah's made it. It was amazing. It was so good. We had the first piece it was last week you made it, and I said, as soon as this is finished, can you make the exact same thing again?
It was so good.
And you did, and
Anyway, you've made me forget what my actual question... Oh,
sorry.
My question was, let's say, just because I'm very aware that in the sort of dance world, there's a lot of people who need general advice and need just some reassurance that it's okay to eat carbs, eat whatever, you know, fuel your body, look after your body, and that's the most important thing. But there is also a lot of people who are maybe a bit past that point and need some more specific professional help. How would they go about reaching out to someone like you, or is that even the right thing for them to do? Would it be better to go to the GP? Would it be like, do you know what the best thing for them to do? If there's someone sat at home thinking, do you know what, I can't do this myself, I need some help.
Yeah, so I would say the best thing to do would probably be to go to your GP, who can then refer you on to, like, we've got a community dietetics team, but we've also got a eating disorders team as well.
Yeah.
So it would depend what category they fall into, really. But if it's to do with, you know, sort of relationship with food and things, and they feel like they need a bit more support in that area, I would firstly go to your GP. If you don't get anywhere with that, I know there is some, I don't think it's in every part of the country, but in some parts there are sort of self-referrals to disordered eating programs or eating disorders. There's also a lot of information online. There's a
not on TikTok,
company called Beat,
Yeah,
BEAT. They offer some really good advice, and you can have support calls with them, I believe. It's not my specialty, so I don't know too much about it, but I know there's different avenues you can go down to get a bit of support. So I would explore those options probably first.
Amazing. Do you have anything else you want to say, or you feel pretty said all your piece?
I think I've said everything really, other than, yes, balanced diet. It's okay to eat cake sometimes. Not all the time, but enjoy your cake.
Yeah, enjoy your food.
Damn right. Anything you want to say, Harry?
I don't think so. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Hannah,
I've loved this podcast.
It's really, really insightful, and I think it's a slight sort of different track to the kind of stuff we normally talk about on here. Yeah,
but equally, if not more important than anything we've done.
Very important, because it's a life thing, isn't it? What you eat, you're going to eat for the rest of your life. So it's just important to sort of have a bit more of an understanding about that, I think. So really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
and I'm sure other people, whoever listens, will appreciate that too. And, you know, we normally say take what you want from these podcasts, and
take cake.
Yeah, today just have a slice of cake and that's all right.
What was I going to say? So Hannah is on all the Instagrams and everything. We'll Health with Han. We'll put all our details in the show notes. And yeah, we'll if you can look at. I love your stuff. I love your content. I love your.
Thank you. I've been a bit quiet on it, but I will look to put some more content on in the future.
I think it's really beneficial. It's
good. You know, whether people react to it or not, I think you'll be helping people in some way. Definitely do the TikTok thing, because I think
everyone goes
really
short
good.
abuse for Hannah to do TikTok.
I imagine it to be a bit like who's that doctor? Dr. Mike? You know that
Dr. Mike? Yeah, everyone says
the American guy who like watches stuff and he's like reacts to it as a professional. Have you seen that stuff?
I think I have heard of him, yeah. I think I've seen a few of his things.
That's what I imagine you to do on TikTok in that kind of way.
We were watching one of his videos, and he like plays videos side by side of like, this is like advice that they're giving on TikTok. And he's like, why would you do that? That's so stupid.
Yeah, he gets really quite angry in like
funny.
Fun way.
Yeah.
But you'd probably enjoy it, and I can see you doing something like that. But now, yeah, if you found this helpful, have a look at Han's Instagram. And could people reach out to you? Is that allowed on your Instagram or something?
They can if they want. I'm not currently doing one-to-one sessions or anything like that, just because I am fairly newly qualified. It's nearly coming up to a year now that I've been qualified. But I am looking into setting up something like that in the future, so just watch this space.
Nice.
Yeah, that would be cool. Because I think even if you're not doing one-to-one stuff, you'll be able to maybe point people in a good direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I know a couple of dietitians who do one-to-one, so I can, signpost them over to their Instagram pages as well.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's been really, really fun, this.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
So Tina chat with Harry and Pat and Hannah.
And Sarah, not Pat. Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
We will see you next week. Have a great weekend.
You have been listening to Tina Chat with Quartz Academy.
If you have any questions or things you want to know, visit our website at www.portsacademy.co.uk or email us info@portsacademy.co.uk.
You can also find us on our socials, Instagram, Facebook and TikTok.
Thanks for listening.
We're so happy you're here. See you next week.
Bye.